I orchestrated the total collapse of a $200 million real estate empire, driving its powerful CEO to complete bankruptcy. It wasn't about business. It was because that CEO was my new stepfather, and he watched my mother abandon me at 15 for a yacht. My name is Charlotte. The moment my life cleaved into a before and after wasn't loud. It was the quiet, indifferent click of my mother's heels on the polished floor of Chicago O'Hare International Airport. I was 15. She, Cynthia, handed me a single, crisp $100 bill and gave me a casual shrug that would haunt my dreams for years. With her new husband, Lawrence, and his perfect children in tow, she walked away towards Gate B12, leaving me under the flickering departures board, on her way to a 2-week yachting vacation in the Greek Isles. She thought she was abandoning an inconvenient teenager, a relic from a past she was desperate to erase. What she couldn't possibly have known, in her rush for luxury and status, was that she wasn't just walking away from her daughter. She was walking away from a $300 million inheritance tied directly to me, and in doing so, she had just lit the fuse on one of the most calculated family revenge stories you will ever hear. That $100 bill wasn't a lifeline. It was the down payment on the destruction of everything she held dear. That feeling of being erased in plain sight is a cold, lonely place. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one in your own family, just type the city you're watching from in the comments. Let's see how far this silent strength of ours reaches. It all started not with a bang, but with that quiet, dismissive click of her heels on the cold airport floor. But this story, this path of calculated revenge, wasn't born from just a moment of teenage heartbreak. It was forged in the fine print of a legal document my mother thought she understood, but never truly respected. You see, my grandfather on my father's side, a man of old Boston money who measured a person's worth in character, not carats, had passed away 6 months prior. He had never trusted Cynthia. In his will, he left me a trust fund valued at $300 million, untouchable until my 18th birthday. However, he included a meticulously crafted addendum, the morality clause. This clause stipulated that for my mother to act as the paid trustee and collect a 7-figure annual fee she had to prove, without question, her status as a fit, stable, and morally upstanding guardian. The irony is staggering. Cynthia saw this luxurious vacation with Lawrence as the final performance piece to prove that stability. She thought abandoning me for 2 weeks was a small, manageable sacrifice to secure her role in a wealthy new dynasty. What she failed to comprehend was that my grandfather's lawyers weren't watching for appearances, they were watching for character. And by choosing a yacht in the Aegean Sea over her own child, she had just given them all the evidence they would ever need to disqualify her. It's exhausting carrying the weight of a role you never chose. Let me know. Were you ever the family scapegoat too? Type savior if you were always the fixer, or star if you were always the golden child. I really want to see the balance in our community here. My mother was playing checkers, while my grandfather, even from the grave, was playing a game of chess. This world of legal chess games and 7-figure fees felt like a different universe from the one I was raised in. Before the sprawling, sterile white stucco mansion in Scottsdale, there was our small 2-bedroom duplex in Cleveland, Ohio. Life there wasn't measured in square footage, but in genuine moments. I remember humid summer nights, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant rumble of freight trains. My mom, Cynthia, and I would sit on the porch steps, sharing a single bottle of root beer, talking for hours while the fireflies blinked in the twilight. We didn't have much. Dinner was often something simple she'd picked up after a long shift waitressing, but we had each other. Her pride was radiant the day I won the county science fair with my model volcano, a trophy she kept on the television for months. That life was real, it was grounded. Then came Scottsdale. The air there didn't smell like rain and industry. It smelled of chlorine from the infinity pool and the faint, expensive perfume that seemed to be permanently infused in the carpets. The house was a palace of beige marble and glass, so quiet and cavernous that you felt completely alone even when it was full of people. The warmth of our Cleveland kitchen was replaced by a pristine, stainless steel showroom where a private chef prepared meals I couldn't pronounce. My mother shed her Cleveland identity like a snake sheds its skin, trading her waitress uniform for designer dresses and her easy laugh for a tight, social smile. She was a ghost in her own new life, and in turn, she made me a ghost in ours. My ghostly status in that Scottsdale mansion wasn't just a feeling, it was a carefully enforced reality, engineered by my stepfather, Lawrence, and his two children, Brent and Tiffany. To them, I wasn't a new sister. I was a foreign object, a smudge on their otherwise perfect, sun-bleached portrait of wealth. Lawrence, a man who built his empire on aggressive real estate deals, treated me with a kind of polite contempt that was more chilling than outright cruelty. At dinner parties with his friends, he'd introduce me with a dismissive wave of his hand as Cynthia's girl from Ohio, as if my home state was a quaint, pitiful handicap. Brent, who was a year older, would simply look through me, his eyes glazing over whenever I tried to join a conversation, before turning to his father to discuss his new Mustang or his golf handicap. But Tiffany was the most proficient in the art of making someone feel worthless. I'll never forget standing in the hallway, hidden by the curve of the grand staircase, and hearing her on the phone with a friend. "Oh my God, you have to see the clothes her mom packed for her." She'd laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. It's like a time capsule from a 1,990 seconds thrift store. She's the charity case that came with the marriage certificate. My mother heard it all, but her only response was silence. Her fear of rocking the boat was always greater than her instinct to protect me. The sting of being deliberately made to feel small by the very people who should build you up is a unique kind of pain. If you've ever had to fight for your own worth against people who are supposed to love you, this space is for you. Subscribe and join a community of people who know that your value is absolutely non-negotiable. Being treated like a piece of furniture has one single advantage. People eventually forget you have ears. My constant, quiet presence made me invisible, and in their arrogance, they grew careless. It was a Tuesday night, sometime after midnight, and the oppressive quiet of the Scottsdale mansion was a stark contrast to the city sounds of Cleveland I missed so much. I was walking downstairs for a glass of water when I saw a sliver of light from under the door of Lawrence's home office. I heard their voices, low and tense. I stopped, pressing myself into the shadows of the hallway. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Cynthia?" Lawrence's voice was sharp, laced with an anxiety I'd never heard from him before. That morality clause in the old man's will is dangerously vague. The Boston lawyers are not idiots. My mother's reply was a desperate attempt at reassurance. "It's fine, Larry. All we need is the image of a perfect, stable family. The annual trustee fee alone is more than I made in 10 years. This yachting trip is the key. It's the ultimate portrait of family unity." Then, Lawrence's voice dropped even lower, and the words he spoke froze the blood in my veins. "Then the Charlotte problem needs a permanent solution. For 2 weeks, at least. Her sulking around is not the image we need to project. She's a loose end." In that instant, the vague hurt I'd been feeling for months crystallized into something sharp and terrifying. I wasn't just the unwanted stepdaughter. I was a problem to be solved, a loose end to be tied up. I was a financial liability standing in the way of their payday. The week leading up to the trip was an exercise in silent horror. Knowing what I knew, every packed suitcase, every cheerful mention of our vacation felt like a lie directed squarely at me. The morning we left for O'Hare, the knot in my stomach was so tight I could barely breathe. At the check-in counter, Lawrence presented 5 passports to the agent. Not 6. He and my mother avoided my eyes as the agent handed out 5 boarding passes, each one a golden ticket to a world I was being surgically removed from. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling. "I think you're missing one." The agent looked at me with pity before glancing at her screen. "I only have 5 passengers on this itinerary." Honorable Lawrence cleared his throat, a signal. "Your mother will handle this." And just like that, he, Brent, and Tiffany wheeled their mountain of luggage towards security, leaving me and Cynthia standing alone. "What's going on?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. She wouldn't meet my gaze. "Listen, Charlotte. Lawrence feels this trip is a chance for his family to truly bond. You understand." The words were like ice. "But I'm your family," I pleaded, the sound swallowed by the terminal's roar. "I'm your daughter." That's when her expression hardened. "Don't make a scene," she hissed, her fingers digging into my arm. She pressed the folded $100 bill into my palm. "Take an Uber home. You're mature enough to handle it." And then she gave it. A slight, almost imperceptible shrug that dismissed 15 years of my existence as she turned and walked away, never once looking back. For 6 hours, I was a ghost haunting the terminals of O'Hare. I watched other families greet each other with tearful hugs, my own tears having dried into salty tracks on my cheeks. My phone was my only lifeline, and I scrolled through the contacts, a pathetic list of people who were all part of my mother's new world. Then I saw his name, Dad, Arthur. My mother had spent years painting him as a failure, a man who couldn't handle responsibility, and had gladly faded into the background. "He's moved on, sweetie," she'd say with a dismissive wave. Some men just aren't cut out for it. The thought of facing his rejection on top of my mother's felt like it would shatter what little was left of me. But desperation is a powerful motivator. Hiding in the sterile quiet of a family restroom, I pressed the call button. When he answered, his voice was just as I remembered, and the whole story spilled out of me in a torrent of gasps and sobs. He didn't offer pity. He didn't ask what I might have done to provoke her. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then his voice changed, dropping an octave, turning from warm concern to cold steel. "Charlotte, listen to me. Stay exactly where you are. I'm sending someone to you right now. I'm on my way." Less than an hour later, a woman in a perfectly tailored business suit found me. She wasn't a family friend. She was a senior partner at a Chicago law firm. She was my father's first move in a war my mother didn't even know had been declared. We've all had moments where we felt the world had turned its back on us. Who was that one person who answered the call when you truly hit rock bottom? You don't have to name them. Just type MYensure in the comments if you've been lucky enough to have someone like that in your life. My father, Arthur, didn't meet me in the chaos of the main terminal. The lawyer escorted me through a series of secure doors to a private hangar where a sleek jet waited on the tarmac. The moment I saw him walking down the air stairs, the years of my mother's carefully constructed lies began to crumble. He looked older, with silver at his temples, but his eyes were the same kind eyes I remembered from my childhood. Once we were airborne, soaring miles above the life I had just been cast out from, he opened a leather briefcase. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke with a calm, quiet intensity that was more damning than any scream. He showed me the documents. For 10 years, he had been sending child support payments of over $5,000 a month, directly deposited into an account my mother had sole access to. He showed me copies of birthday cards and letters, all returned to sender or marked with address unknown after my mother moved us to Scottsdale without notice. And then he told me about his father's will. "Your grandfather never trusted her, Charlotte. He left you everything, a $300 million trust. But he put a clause in it, a test of character. A test she just failed spectacularly." Sitting there, surrounded by polished mahogany and soft leather, I finally understood. The years of thrift store clothes, the microwave dinners, the constant narrative that we were struggling, it was all a performance. My mother hadn't been a victim of circumstance. She had been the architect of a decade-long deception. I wasn't just abandoned. I had been a pawn in a game I never even knew I was playing. The heartbreak of my mother's betrayal was a storm, but in its aftermath, the air became incredibly clear. My father didn't just see a daughter who needed comforting. He saw a witness. As his legal team briefed us in his Boston high-rise office, they made it clear. Lawrence's $200 million real estate empire was a house of cards, but they needed an ace to bring it down. And I realized I was holding it. I told them about a frantic argument I'd overheard a month before. Lawrence, pale and furious, had brandished a small, black portable hard drive at my mother. "The real books are on here, Cynthia," he'd hissed. "Every dirty deal, every kickback, every zoning bribe. If this drive ever sees the light of day, we are finished." I watched him hide it in a hollowed-out copy of The Art of the Deal on his office bookshelf. At the time, it was just a fragment of their constant drama. Now, it was our weapon. The plan was audacious. With Cynthia and Lawrence still sipping cocktails in Santorini for another week, my father and I would fly back to Scottsdale. With his lawyer present as a witness, I would use my house key to legally enter the property to retrieve my personal effects. My real mission: To walk into that office and take the one thing that could burn their entire world to the ground. Have you ever had that one moment, that flash of lightning clarity where you knew, without a doubt, exactly what you had to do, no matter how terrifying it was? If you know that feeling, that switch flipping on in your soul, just type the word clarity in the comments below. I want to see how many of us have been there. This was no longer just a story of abandonment, it was the beginning of a takedown. Walking out of that Scottsdale house with the hard drive in my bag was the first time in years I felt the ground solid beneath my feet. We flew back to Boston, and my father's team of analysts spent 48 hours decrypting the contents. It was worse and better than we could have imagined. When my mother and Lawrence finally returned from Greece, tanned and oblivious, they found my room stripped bare and a single letter from my father's legal team summoning them to his office in Boston. They must have thought they were walking into a custody negotiation. They were wrong. They walked into a corporate boardroom on the 50th floor overlooking the Boston Harbor. I was seated at the long mahogany table next to my father, flanked by his lawyers. My mother rushed towards me, her face a mask of practiced concern. "Charlotte, honey." We were terrified. "How could you just disappear?" My father simply raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. His lead counsel, a woman with eyes as sharp as glass, slid a document across the table. "Miss Vance," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "This is a formal notice. Due to the act of child abandonment at O'Hare International, you have been found in breach of the morality clause in your late father-in-law's will. You are hereby permanently disqualified as a trustee." The color drained from my mother's face. Then, my father placed the small black hard drive on the table and pushed it slowly toward Lawrence. "I believe this is yours," he said quietly. The confident, arrogant man I'd known for 2 years instantly vanished, replaced by a cornered animal. It was the first time I spoke. "You said I was a loose end," I said, my voice steady. "Consider this, us tying it up." My father believes that true revenge isn't a single, emotional blow. It's a series of precise, calculated moves that dismantle an opponent's foundation before they even know the war has begun. After they stumbled out of that boardroom, Lawrence and Cynthia scrambled to do damage control, assuming this was a private family matter they could contain. They fundamentally misunderstood the world my father operates in. Phase 1 of our plan wasn't aimed at their bank accounts. It was aimed at their most prized possession, their reputation. In the world of Scottsdale's new money, perception is everything. My father's team, with my guidance, carefully selected information from the hard drive, not the outright illegal material, not yet. Instead, they anonymously leaked documents to a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, detailing how Lawrence's signature luxury golf community was built on land acquired through predatory loans that targeted senior citizens. The story that ran wasn't about crime, it was about a profound lack of character. It was a story of greed. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The invitations to the governor's charity gala were rescinded. Their membership at the exclusive country club was put under review. Friends stopped returning their calls. Tiffany and Brent, who had built their identities on their father's reputation, were suddenly social pariahs at their elite private school. We didn't just expose a bad business deal, we held up a mirror to their true selves, and the entire community turned away in disgust. Every family has a public face and a private reality. Have you ever been the only one who knew the truth behind the perfect picture? If you know exactly what I'm talking about, just type "I know" in the comments. No explanation needed. We get it. They were being isolated, cut off from the herd, long before the real attack even began. Once their social capital was gone, their financial capital became incredibly vulnerable. Banks get nervous when their high-profile clients end up in the Wall Street Journal for unethical practices. Investors start pulling out. That's when my father executed Phase 2. It was a masterclass in corporate warfare. While Lawrence was busy trying to repair his shattered reputation, my father's investment team was quietly and methodically buying his debt. Through a network of anonymous shell corporations, they approached the now anxious lenders who had financed Lawrence's empire and bought his multi-million-dollar loans for pennies on the dollar. Within a month, without him ever knowing, my father had become his single largest creditor. Lawrence thought he was fighting a public relations battle. In reality, he was already financially checkmated. The final move was as simple as it was brutal. My father's corporation called the loans due. All of them. Immediately. Lawrence was blindsided. He scrambled to find new financing, but with his name now toxic in the financial world, no one would touch him. He was trapped, forced to liquidate his assets to cover the debt. And the crown jewel of his empire, the very Scottsdale golf community he had built his identity around, had to be sold in a fire sale. The irony was poetic. The anonymous buyer who swept in and purchased his entire legacy for a fraction of its worth was, of course, a holding company controlled by my father. The man he had scorned had just become the owner of his entire life's work. Bankruptcy for a man like Lawrence wasn't just a financial document, it was a social execution. The empire was gone, and all the props that held up their glittering Scottsdale life went with it. The sprawling white mansion was the first to go, sold at auction. The fleet of luxury cars was repossessed. The private school tuition for Brent and Tiffany went unpaid, and they were quietly withdrawn, forced into the public school system they had once openly mocked. Lawrence, a man who had derived his entire sense of self from his net worth, was a ghost in his own failed life, facing a mountain of lawsuits from the investors he'd deceived. But the most poetic justice was reserved for my mother. Their marriage, a transaction built on his wealth and her ambition, couldn't survive the financial collapse. Lawrence, stripped of his power, saw her not as a partner but as another liability, and he cut her loose with the same casual indifference she had once shown me. The last I heard, Cynthia was back in a waitress uniform, working at a mid-range chain restaurant in a Phoenix suburb. She had traded her daughter for a life of luxury, and when the luxury vanished, she was left with absolutely nothing. Her greatest fear, the life she had fought so desperately to escape, had become her prison. It's a strange, sobering thing to step back and watch people finally face the natural consequences of their own choices. If you believe that what goes around truly comes around, just type the word karma in the comments below. Let the universe know we're watching. Their real punishment wasn't poverty. It was being forced to live with the empty reality of who they were when the money was gone. While their world was imploding, mine was quietly, intentionally being built on a foundation of truth and trust. Revenge, my father taught me, isn't just about tearing an enemy down. It's about building something better and more enduring in its place. The years that followed were not about gloating over their demise. They were about education. My father didn't just give me access to the trust, he gave me the tools to understand it. I spent my high school summers interning with his analysts, learning about finance, asset management, and philanthropy. I went to Boston College and earned a degree in economics, not because I had to, but because I was determined to be the master of my own fate, not a passive beneficiary. The day I turned 18 wasn't a lavish party. It was a board meeting. I took my seat at the head of the table and formally assumed control of the $300 million trust my grandfather had left me. My first act as president of the board was to sign a motion. We took the Scottsdale golf community, Lawrence's former crown jewel, and converted a significant portion of it into a foundation. Today, it provides pro bono legal services and subsidized housing for elderly individuals who have been targeted by predatory real estate developers. We took a monument to greed and transformed it into a sanctuary of justice. The money was a tool, but the real inheritance my father gave me was the restored relationship, the years of guidance, and the unwavering belief that my worth was never up for negotiation. I didn't just get my life back, I built a new one. Looking back, the path from that cold airport floor to the head of a boardroom table wasn't just a journey of a few thousand miles, it was a profound lesson in the true nature of power. I learned that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet, inevitable result of people's own choices. The most satisfying part of this entire family revenge story wasn't watching them lose. It was the quiet confidence that came from knowing their downfall was a direct consequence of their own character, or lack thereof. I also learned the true definition of family. It isn't an obligation defined by blood. It's a conscious choice defined by action. It's about who shows up. My father, the man I was taught to believe had forgotten me, showed up from across the country. My mother, the woman who was supposed to be my protector, walked away for a vacation. Family is the person who answers the phone at your lowest moment, the one who doesn't just offer comfort but offers a strategy. But the most crucial lesson was about my own strength. For years, I had allowed their definition of me to become my reality, the inconvenient girl from Ohio, the charity case. Their betrayal, as brutal as it was, forced me to find a strength I never knew I possessed. The ultimate revenge wasn't the money or the corporate takedown. It was looking in the mirror and no longer seeing the girl they abandoned, but a woman who understood her own worth. A woman who had built a life so full and meaningful that their memory no longer had the power to cast a shadow. So that's my story. But the reason I share it isn't for you to focus on the numbers or the corporate strategy. I share it because somewhere, someone watching this right now feels like that 15-year-old girl on the cold airport floor. You feel forgotten, disposable, like a liability in someone else's life. Please hear me when I say this. Their inability to see your worth does not decrease its value. Justice, I've learned, isn't always a dramatic courtroom victory. Sometimes, it's the quiet, inevitable karma that finds those who build their lives on a foundation of lies. And family is not a chain of blood, but a tapestry woven with threads of choice, loyalty, and unwavering support. It's the people who fly across the country, not the ones who walk away. As for forgiveness, it's the final piece of the puzzle. For years, I thought forgiveness meant telling my mother what she did was okay. It's not. Forgiveness is for you. It's the act of accepting that you cannot get from a person what they do not have within them to give. I forgive my mother for her limitations, for her brokenness. That forgiveness was not a gift to her. It was me finally cutting the last invisible string she had attached to my soul. It was the final act of setting myself free. Your story is your own, and the scars you carry are not signs of damage, but maps of your resilience. They show where you have been, but they will never define where you are going. The world may never know the battles you've fought in silence, but we do. Subscribe if these stories speak your truth. Join our community, and let's continue to turn our scars into stars together.